With the new chapters right around the corner, I want to give my final predictions for Chapter 4. Between the trailer and the extra images, we finally got our first good look at the Chapter 4 Dark World. And it mostly just confirms stuff that I already believed, namely that it will be in the church and that Caddy and Jockington will be there. Which is great, it means we're off to a good start and I have to spend much less time going over certain things as they are now already confirmed. So now let's get right into the predictions. Now I'm actually going to save my predictions for what we will be doing in the Light World later, and for now just skip ahead into the Dark World. First I'm going to go over what I think the areas of the Dark World will be like, and then go over the plot and narrative beats I think will happen. Now looking at the footage of Chapter 4's Dark World from the trailer, I believe these are from a high-action intro sequence, kinda like a mix of Chapter 2's intro and Chapter 1's intro sequence, specifically the part where we are running away from Lancer. After this fancy intro sequence, we will then go into the first area of the Dark World, the Field of Broken Glass. Or maybe it'll be called the Field of Colored Glass, something like that at least. Basically, it's stained glass themed. I'm mostly basing this idea off of the trailer as it very much looks like the things Chris and Susie are climbing on are meant to be stained glass. But this is also just a very straightforward idea for an area, as stained glass is peak church aesthetic, and not doing a full area for it would honestly be a huge waste of what could easily be one of the coolest looking areas in the game. After the field, we will go into a short transitional area where we will probably fight a boss. Maybe it will be Caddy, maybe it will be a Darkner, who knows. But I think this shorter area will be either some kind of dock or a shoreline, because it will lead into the second major area, the Lake of Blood. Okay, you remember how Alvin was talking about the sick fruit juice? The fruit juice is clearly meant to be a stand-in for communion wine, which of course becomes the blood of Jesus Christ. So I think this idea of the juice becoming blood will be used as the basis for the second area of the Dark World, as I think it's a really cool idea. To go into a little more detail about it, we see this concept art of Susie getting a cup of fruit juice from a large bowl, so I think there will be more than enough to justify it being a full area. It's also worth noting that the cup that Susie is holding is likely the same as this cup darkener that has already been shown off. Now, how we actually travel across the Lake of Blood I think is very up in the air. Maybe we will take a boat, maybe there will be a rock path to jump across. It might just end up being like Waterfall, but with blood. Or maybe it will be a lake in the same way that lake area in Elden Ring is a lake, where the water is only ankle deep. Also, I keep saying lake, but really it could be any body of water of blood, like it could be a river of blood instead. Now onto the final dungeon. Based on the teasers we have seen so far, I think it will be one of two things. I think it will either be a big tower or a series of connected towers, or it will be a big cathedral. I mostly think this based on the borders we have seen for the chapter, as well as the idea just being very cool. So that's what I think we're going to be doing with the areas of the Dark World. So now let's cover what I think the overall theme of the Dark World will be, as well as the main boss. So with the Dark World being in the church, the obvious answer for the theme would be that it's religious themed. And while I do think that will be a big part of it, I don't think that's going to be all we will be getting in Chapter 4. I think along with religion, we will also see literature, specifically fiction novels, be a major theme in the Chapter 4 Dark World. I think the two ideas will bounce off each other, with the concept of authors being gods to their works being a big idea explored in this chapter. While the areas and darkness will be based on the objects in the church and the religion will be a big part of their designs, I think they will also be thrown through a high fantasy lens in order to work with both themes. And why high fantasy specifically? Because I believe the main thing that is going to be bringing in the literature theme is going to be the Lord of the Hammer, the high fantasy novel written by Gerson Boom that is clearly meant to be a Lord of the Rings parody. And I think the main chapter boss will be the titular Lord of the Hammer, who will be Gerson's self-insert. Basically Gerson, but he drew himself as the Chad. So essentially he'll be a young Gerson in armor wielding a big hammer. And just to clarify, I don't think this will be a Darkner made out of Gerson's hammer. I think this Darkner will just be made from the book. But if we do end up doing Dustners later, then I could see us doing a Gerson Dustner in Chapter 7, where we will get a scene with Alvin, Gerson, and the Lord of the Hammer all hanging out together, which would serve as the conclusion to the Boom family subplot. And I think doing the Lord of the Hammer in Chapter 4 has an insane amount of potential to both deliver great Undertale fan service in the same vein as Spamton Neo did, as well as being a great vehicle for advancing Ralsei's character, in a similar way that Queen was for Noelle. And that's on top of how we can comment on the themes of the game and just explore general ideas that the game is exploring, like fiction and the creation of it, as well as some other things. And overall, this is what I think Alvin's dialogue has been building up to. Him talking about his father and the Lord of the Hammer in Chapter 2, it was all just set up and foreshadowing for the Chapter 4 Dark World. But to go into what I mean about the Undertale fan service and advancing Ralsei's character, in the past, Toby has talked about setting out to make Spamton Neo because he really wanted to give the fans a real Mettaton Neo fight. With this same idea in mind, I think it's not just Mettaton that he wanted to do something like that with. Back in Undertale, Gerson is hyped up to be this old war hero who fought in the Monster-Human War and was the captain of the Royal Guard before undying, and was known as the Hammer of Justice. I know personally I would really like to see a boss fight against a Gerson in his prime, and I think a lot of other people want to see that as well. I think that's a big part of why Alvin Knight is as popular of a theory as it is, because people see it as a way to have basically a young Gerson boss fight. And for me personally, I think doing the Lord of the Hammer as the Chapter 4 main boss is the absolute best way to give us this Gerson boss fight. Now, in order to get into how the Lord of the Hammer would be perfect for advancing Ralsei's character, I do need to quickly explain my Ralsei theory for anyone that's not super familiar with my theories. So basically, I think Ralsei is more or less Chris's fursona. I think he's essentially the physical manifestation of Chris's body dysphoria, and that he is Chris's Red Horde headband and was made by Chris in order to keep the player in line. I made a whole other video about this, so if you're totally lost right now, go watch that one. But basically, he's a self-insert for Chris, and I think you can see with how the Lord of the Hammer is Gerson's self-insert, they would easily be able to compare themselves with each other, and that this would help Ralsei go through his character arc. Overall, a lot could be done with this idea. And I do have a lot more to say on this point, but I'm going to save that for a little bit later, because I want to talk about it in the context of how I think the plot of the Dark World will go and what narrative advancements we will be getting in it. So let's just get into that. So to start things off, which Lighteners will be in the Dark World? Well, we know that Jockington is going to be there, and if Jockington is there, then Caddy will definitely be there as well. And in my opinion, there's no reason to do Caddy without also having Noelle. Because right now, the main conflict set up with Caddy is that she doesn't like Susie, specifically she doesn't want Susie to be in a relationship with Noelle. So Noelle needs to be there in order for this conflict to be handled. So we are getting Caddy, Jockington, and Noelle. So with that being said, how do I think they will be utilized in the Dark World? Well, when it comes to how Caddy will be in the Dark World, I see it going one of two ways. Either as some kind of mage, like a necromancer, or she will use Jockington as a whip. As for Jockington, I think part of the joke will be that he won't change really at all in the Dark World. He'll basically still be in his Light World outfit. But with the whole Jockington grows a beard thing, maybe he will become a wizard. But also I feel like he's probably just going to be mostly an accessory to Caddy. But no matter how they end up in the Dark World, I do think they will be a boss fight. But what I really want to see from them is I want them to call Susie out. I want Caddy to be a complete Susie hater from start to finish. I want to see Caddy reprimand Susie for all of the terrible things she has done and force her to face some kind of judgment for her actions, and make Susie confess her sins. So far, Susie has just kind of gotten away with everything, so I really think we need someone to criticize her in order to really move her character forward. And I don't want Caddy to forgive Susie or become friends by the end, I just want her to hate her. Overall, this conflict should expand on Susie's past and grow her character forward. It will probably also move Susie and Noelle's relationship forward as well. Okay, I think that's everything I want to say about Caddy, So now onto the final part of the Dark World. I've already mentioned Ralsei, and now I want to go into the specifics that I think could happen with him in this chapter. I think at some point, probably in the second half of the Dark World, the main chapter boss will kidnap Ralsei. Sometime after this, Susie will get worried about him and ask Chris what they think is happening to him. This will trigger an astral projection scene, just like the Ferris wheel scene in Chapter 2, where Chris and Susie will have a private conversation together off-screen that we don't see, and we will watch Ralsei talk with the main chapter boss, the Lord of the Hammer. This conversation will really dig deep into a lot of things I've already mentioned earlier about the nature of Ralsei and the Lord of the Hammer, and what it means to be a Darkener. This will be a huge moment in Ralsei's character arc. However, a lot of the exact details about what will be said really depend on what the conclusion of Ralsei's character will actually be. For me, I mostly see it going one of two ways. Either Ralsei will somehow transcend and become a Lightener, or he will stay a Darkener, but have a deeper understanding of himself and his fate. I feel that the former would be very narratively satisfying to see play out, but I also feel like it doesn't make a ton of sense thematically. While the latter would still be satisfying, it would just be a bit sadder overall, so I think the latter is more likely. But no matter what happens, Ralsei will find an answer to what it means to be Ralsei. Of course, after some time we will go and save Ralsei, and then go to fight the boss. Also, if Ralsei does become a Lightener, then the narration will say Ralsei is filled with determination right at the end of the cutscene before the boss. And then after the fight, though honestly it could be before the fight depending on how things play out, I think we will get a very important and emotional scene where Ralsei reveals his secrets and the new revelations he has had about himself after talking with the Lord of the Hammer. He will reveal to Susie that Chris is the Knight, and that he was created by Chris and is Chris's Redhorn headband. That his body is the physical manifestation of Chris's body dysphoria, and this fact made him question both his own identity and purpose. Whatever revelation he has had will be stated, and this will be the climax of Ralsei's character arc, as well as moving Chris's character forward and giving us a ton of insight on them as well. Again, this scene will be very emotional, and I will cry. But I don't know how Susie will react to this scene. Like, she should be pretty upset by a lot of this news, but I feel like she will be more upset about Darkeners being objects than Chris being the Knight. A lot of her reaction will also be dependent on how her and Caddy's conflict was handled, and how Ralsei phrases the reveal and his excuse for it. And also, I just overall feel like she can't stay super upset for very long, because we do need the plot to advance at some point. Also, I think after this, the Lord of the Hammer will reveal that he knew that Chris was the Knight from the start. Like, he just figured it out right away after looking at Chris, but chose to play along because he knew that's what Chris wanted him to do, plus he wanted to help Ralsei. This doesn't necessarily need to happen, I mostly just think it's a cool idea that after 3 idiots, the 4th boss is actually smart and is also cool and stuff. But then after that, we will go and seal the fountain. And that is about it for the Chapter 4 Dark World. So now I'm going to be talking about the Light World segments and Castletown. But the first thing we need to talk about is actually Chapter 3. Specifically, does Chapter 3 have a Light World segment? A lot of people believe that Chapter 3 won't have a Light World segment, and that the chapter will end with us sealing the fountain. And there's a couple of different reasons why people think this, but it's not that important to go into, so I'm not really going to cover them. Because I'm personally pretty 50-50 on the idea. But depending on the answer, it then asks the question of how Chris is going to make the next Dark World. And for that reason, I have prepared 2 slightly different theories, depending on if we get a Light World segment in Chapter 3. If Chapter 3 does have a Light World segment, then the ending of Chapter 3 could just be more or less the same as Chapter 1, where Chris rips out the soul, and then goes to the church to make a dark fountain in one of the back rooms. But assuming that Chapter 3 doesn't have any Light World at all, I think Chapter 4 will have 2 full Light World segments. I mean, we actually know this for almost a fact based on these 2 Chapter 4 screenshots with different weather. So the first Light World segment will start with us doing what we would have done in the Chapter 3 Light World segment if it had one. While I have already covered this in my Chapter 3 prediction video, I will go over it again for anyone that didn't see it or remember what I said. Toriel and Undying will be sleeping in the living room, but unlike last time, they are not going to wake up right away. Instead, Chris and Susie are going to leave them sleeping. Then we're going to go into Chris's room, take the birdcage out of the wagon, take the wagon downstairs, and put the TV in it, and then use it to take the TV to the school closet. After we leave the castle town, Toriel will call Chris and tell them to return home immediately. When we return to the house, Toriel and Undying will be there along with the mayor. Toriel will explain to the mayor that someone slashed her car's tires and then broke into her house and stole her TV. And not only did Undying do nothing to stop this, but Toriel found her sleeping on the couch. The mayor will either put Undying on leave, or just fire her straight up. And then the mayor will invite the Dreamers to stay at her house for the next few days, while her and Napstablook work on investigating the house that is now a crime scene. After that, I think Toriel will take everyone to go to the church. We will sit through the sermon that Alvin gives, which will give us some insight on important lore regarding the Light World religion. We know this will happen pretty much for a fact based on the concept art of Susie with the fruit juice. If you want to know what I think Alvin will talk about in this scene, I actually made a little video about it, so you can go watch that one if you want. Afterwards, everyone will leave, but Chris will stay behind in the church. They will probably just tell Susie that they want to make a private prayer, or something like that. Then Chris will rip out the soul and make the fountain, and then walk out of the church. After that, I think Chris and Susie will go to the diner. We know they do this from the teasers. And then after that, we can go around the town and talk to Onion and all the other NPCs. It's also possible that we can start Mettaton's side quest now, and if we hang out with him in the morning, then I think we'll have to come back after the Dark World to finish his side quest. Now what do I think we will be doing with Mettaton? Well, I think the main goal of his side quest is to try and help him make a body for himself. I also think we will also meet Mad Mew Mew, and she will already be in the Mew Mew doll. And maybe she will also have other stuff going on that we can do with her as well. But no Papyrus. I think we probably won't get to hang out with him till at least Chapter 5. After the player is done with all the Light World activities they want to do, we will head back to the church, knowing there is a Dark World there. Or we will find some reason to go back to the church, like for example, we run into Noelle and she says that Caddy lost her phone at the church and went to go get it, but hasn't called her back yet. Which of course then we go and fall into the Dark World and go and do the whole Dark World adventure, which of course I've already talked about. We leave the Dark World and Chris robs the church. We take the Darkeners back to Castletown, and I think we'll get a fairly important scene with the Lord of the Hammer and King. Because remember, King was an item that was owned by Gerson, so the two bosses had the same Lightner. And basically, I think the Lord of the Hammer is going to totally chew King out, calling him an idiot for not being able to realize that Chris is the knight, and then explain to him that the Lightners didn't abandon him. His Lightner died, and he needs to get over himself. And I think this will be a pretty important moment for taking King's character into this second half of the game and giving him some kind of redemption in a sense. Well, maybe less redemption and more like a wake-up call. And then after that, we'll do the second Light World segment. Talk to everyone again, do the second half of Mettaton's side quest if you started it in the first half. And once you're all done with all of that, you'll go to Noelle's house to finish the chapter. Once you enter Noelle's house, you are locked in and can't go back to Castletown or the rest of Hometown. And this final segment will probably be rather lengthy, as this is most likely where Toby put the Light World save point, as any other time you'd probably be able to have just gone back to Castletown to save. And there will probably be a good amount to do at Noelle's house. I think we'll get a good amount of info regarding the history of the holidays, and I think we will, most importantly, get a good amount of info regarding Des. Maybe we will even see an old family photo of her. Once we are all done at Noelle's house, we will go to bed in her guest bedroom, or wherever we are going to sleep, and then the chapter will end. Yeah, I don't think we're going to have a crazy cliffhanger like we did in Chapter 1 and 2. I do think we'll get a cliffhanger in Chapter 5 though. And with that, that brings us to the end of the chapter. But not the end of the video. There's a few more things to talk about, like the super boss and the Snowgrave route. Now, what is the super boss going to be?
I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really have any great ideas. Nothing I'm even a little confident in. So I'm not even gonna bother giving a guess. Sorry. But now, as for Snowgrave, with Chapter 3 not having Noelle in it, I don't think there will be any real changes in it. Though with that new Spamton sweepstakes, maybe we will see something weird, just not with Noelle. But I think Chapter 4 will have Noelle, so there should be some changes and continuation of the route. So what do I think is going to be changed? Well, overall, I think Noelle is probably going to be trying to figure out what's wrong with Chris, and this will affect how Noelle acts throughout the chapter. I think Caddy will also pick up on Noelle acting weird, and this will change what we do with Caddy in some way. Maybe Caddy will blame Susie for this, and will double down on her Susie hate. But besides that, I'm not really sure what will happen with the weird route in Chapter 4. Honestly, I feel like I have a much clearer idea for what will happen with it in Chapter 5. But one idea I do have regarding it is that if Noelle joins our party again, we won't be able to take the thorn ring off of her, because it will have gotten embedded into her finger. But yeah, I think overall a lot of what will happen depends on certain factors, like Noelle being in the party again and whether or not Susie is there with us. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. To give my final overall thoughts on my Chapter 4 predictions, in a lot of ways, I think this is one of the chapters I feel less overall confident in for my prediction, at least with the more specific parts of it that haven't been confirmed by the teasers. But also, I don't think any of the teasers have ever debunked any of my theories about it, but they have confirmed a lot of admittedly easier parts to guess, like it being in the church and Caddy and Joggington being there. And honestly, it's also the chapter that I think I'm most overall excited for, and have the highest hopes for. So I really hope that I'm right, and it turns out good. I guess we'll see. You know, it's not long now. And anyway, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching till the very end. If you liked it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to chat directly with me, I have a Discord server. A link to that is in the description. If you join before the new chapters drop, you'll get a special role that gets you special privileges in the server that people after the chapters drop will have to pay in order to get access to. So make sure to join the server if you haven't already. And speaking of paying, if you want to help support the channel, I have a Ko-Fi, link to that is in the description. I don't make any money off of ads on these videos. In fact, I don't even think ads run on these videos because YouTube has permanently demonetized my channel for literally nothing. So yeah, it sucks to be me, I guess. So if you want to support the channel, you can do so over on my Ko-Fi. Anyway, that's all. See you when the chapters drop.